It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. This week, we're talking with Guy Branum. Guy's a comic I've known for a long time. He's got a mic in his hand. He's brutally honest, super quick-witted, and really, really funny. And the other thing about Guy is he's smart, like genuinely insightful, like walked away from a legal career to become a comedian. So over my company, Maximum Fun, I came up with a scheme to get Guy a podcast. It's actually the sister show of this show. It's called Pop Rocket. It's a weekly panel discussion about pop culture. Got a group of folks who are all really funny and brilliant. It's honestly one of my favorite shows that we make at Maximum Fun. But Guy always stands out. He's got a lot of TV experience. He was a writer on Chelsea Lately and on Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell. He appeared on camera on both those shows. Now he's got his own show. It's called Talk Show the Game Show. Like you might have gathered from the name, it's basically the ultimate version of what he says are television's two most maligned genres. I mean, it's basically pretty straightforward. Guy hosts a talk show while another guy gives the guests points for doing talk show stuff. And it's real celebrities, folks like Moby and Diablo Cody and Wanda Sykes. It's kind of hard to imagine how it all plays out from me describing it. So here's a little bit from the very beginning of a recent episode.
Tonight, these three all-stars will square off for the title of Best Talk Show Guest in America, and it all starts with this 5-point kickoff question. John Sally was in Bad Boys, Tiffany Haddish was in Girl Trip, and Dan Bucatinsky was on Grey's Anatomy. For 5 points, which hormone produces male secondary sexual characteristics? Tiffany Haddish.
Prostate.
Sorry, no, that's incorrect.
Testosterone.
Testosterone is correct. Congratulations, Dan Bucatinsky. You've just taken the lead, but it's still anybody's game because it's time to play Talk Show the Game Show.
Guy Branum, welcome to Bullseye.
Good to be here.
I should say welcome back to Bullseye. Your voice is heard on almost every Bullseye. You have also done interviews on behalf of Bullseye. You've never been the subject of an interview on Bullseye.
It's true, but we can hardly behave as though there is an appropriate wall between interviewee and interviewer here.
We're cuddling, just so the audience knows. We're cuddling right now. Guy, you grew up in Sacramento, California, but not in Sacramento, California. And any Californian knows that immediately outside of Sacramento, California is a vast sea of those billboards for Clover Stornetta Dairy and basically like pastures.
Right. When people think of California, they think of celebrities and waves and good times and maybe lesbians and winery in the north. But in the middle of California, there is a vast sea of like yellow dead grass where all of your boutique agricultural products come from. So I'm from Sutter County, California, the prune basket of the world.
Is that the real name of Sutter County, California?
Well, they don't actually call it that, but we are very much a prunes, peaches, walnuts, and almonds kind of town, and we have the largest prune dryer in the world.
Now, Guy, you're gay.
I am gay.
Gay, you're Guy. Did you know other gays as a kid?
Well, it's very interesting because I did actually, as a small child, I was exposed to two gay couples. We never called them that. My parents only referred to them by the most common slur for gay people, but there were a pair of doctors who lived on the other side of the orchard from us, and there were two men who owned a flower shop that my mom worked for. So it was something that I was aware of, but in a space that was hostile enough to that one of the first things I knew about it was that it was a horrible, horrible, horrible life. And then my music teacher, she just had a roommate that she spent a lot of time with. We didn't have a name for that.
How old were you when the music teacher had a roommate?
I was like 6 or 7 when I learned about all of these things. I distinctly remember my mom told me about her bosses in kind of the nicest way I ever heard gay people described before I went to college, where she was scared that I would say something embarrassing in front of them. So she said, like, they are married like a man would be to a woman. They are a couple. And I remember being a little bit confused by that, but then sort of learning all of the terrible things that go along with that. And never really, at that point in time, I didn't associate the trouble I was having with culture and people around me with that in any way. I just knew that I was being a boy wrong. And it took me a while to be able to put those things in the same part of my head.
What was wrong about the way you were being a boy?
Look, I did a lot of trying to hold other boys' hands in kindergarten. I had tried to hold everybody's hands in kindergarten. I never wanted to fight with people. They were very upset by the fact that I didn't want to fight with people. I didn't do any torturing of cats, and that's just a normal part of a boy's development in a farm town. I wanted to play with Barbie dolls. I played with He-Man, but I adored Barbie dolls and enjoyed, I wanted to learn to French braid. I wanted to learn to French braid so hard, and they were just like, no, you're not allowed to do that. You shouldn't want that. You should want to be inside or outside. But I desperately wanted to be inside, learning how to cook and French braid.
Oh, a boy's dream of plating.
It just seemed like the most sophisticated thing a person could do.
I want to play a clip from your most recent stand-up album, which is called Effable. And in this clip, you're talking about the fact that being gay is no longer the very special and exclusive fraternity that it once was.
It's a little bit sad, the way things have changed, because, like, it used to be that to be an out gay person, you had to be amazing. You had to be like Oscar Wilde or Virginia Woolf. Now, essentially, we'll let anyone in. Being gay used to be Harvard. Now it's Chico State.
When did you start to think about yourself as gay?
Really late. Like, if you'd asked me if I was gay in college, I would have laughed and explained it away. I didn't come out until law school.
Did you, now I want to be clear, like when you laughed and explained it away when you were in college, was that because you were trying to hide something you knew to be true, or because you were still trying to figure out what you were trying to hide?
It is, like, I was very specifically using the Freudian defense mechanism of denial. Like, not repression. I knew that the thing that aroused me sexually was men, but I was trying to find any way to have an excuse to say I wasn't gay, because that was a bad thing and a weird thing, and I didn't want to be associated with that. There was just something broken in me that meant I was turned on by men, and somehow I was going to be able to fix it. And it took a lot of Berkeley to be able to make me be like okay with that and understand those things in the same place.
Did you understand that you wanted to live in a different world?
Yeah, that I was able to accept from a very early age. And with it came a lot of hostility from my town and to some extent my family of why was I so committed to not wanting to be part of this thing that had no interest in me being there, like a world that kind of hated me and was constantly policing me for my behavior. There was always a lot of, what, you think you're better? And thinking I was better was the only plausible escape from just the hell of everyone constantly being mad at me for the things that seemed most instinctual to me.
It seems like that must have been a really intense conflict, not only because people were always giving you that, I don't know what you want to call it, that guilt trip, that line of attack, but also because no matter how painful it is your home. And so, like, for you, you have to deal with the idea that you want to leave this home that is your home.
It's strange because the things that I have most connection to and most ownership of are very complex emotionally for me. Like, there's the very weird thing of, Jesse, you may not imagine this about me, but I miss pheasant hunting a great deal. Like, every morning during the fall, when I was like 14 until I left for college, my dad would wake me up at 5:30 in the morning, and we would go out to some rice field somewhere, and we would trot around, and we would hunt pheasants. And I hated it more than life itself. It was torture. There was nothing about it that was fun. And now I'm so nostalgic for that experience of like watching a retriever do its job and smelling a pheasant as you cut it open to remove its entrails. Like, And the thing is they're not really things I can do anymore. It's not like I have a dog. It's not like my parents have a dog that you could do this with. And it's so distanced from my own life. But the only reason I'm able to have that kind of nostalgia with it is because I am so distanced from it.
You played on the football team.
I played on the football team. My football coach was one of the few adult men who wasn't terrible to me while I was growing up. There was something like his masculinity was like validated enough by being the football coach that he thought I was great. And like all of these other guys were like constantly like just so pissed off at me. Like, to understand my town is like, it's a very Dust Bowl-y town where all of the old white guys have Southern accents because they were all born in Oklahoma or Arkansas. And like the whole time I was growing up, they would always be, what do you want to do when you grow up? And my usual answer was either waitress or writer. And then they would always be like, don't you want to be a football player? And we're so mad at me for not wanting to be a football player.
They didn't even suggest that you become a waiter instead of a waitress.
I was very young then, and it seemed kind of adorable when I was 3. But there was something so weird and cool about the footballiest of the guys being like, oh yeah, he's great.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest this week is Guy Branum. He hosts Pop Rocket, Bullseye's sister show. He also just got his own TV show. It's called Talk Show the Game Show. It's airing now on Tru TV. Were there good things about being on the football team?
Well, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but like the most wonderful and most terrifying thing for a 14-year-old gay boy is walking into a locker room, because it is both the simultaneous moment of like, oh God, everything I ever wanted to see is right here before me. And also I am so in danger of being found out right now. Like you do kind of feel like a spy, like you're like Kerry Russell in The Americans, like undercover and people are about to find you out. But that part of it was cool.
At what point did you start to think of yourself as gay?
It took the internet. One of the reasons I do love that joke you played about Harvard or Chico State is that I benefited from the 90s. Like, I have to coldly realize that I didn't just pop out of the closet when I was 16 in 1992. It took the world changing for me to be safe enough to be one of those people. And so I have so much regard and admiration for the people who were coming out in 1932 or 1962. What would I have done without them? But it really took, in the same way that like the printing press broke politics and the Catholic Church, and we still haven't gotten things back together again, the internet changed identity and sexuality. Like, you can't keep a secret from yourself the way that you could before, when it is just so easy to privately learn about it and communicate with other gay people. And it took me being terrified, but chatting with other gay guys online and realizing, oh, they're people. They're very nice. They're wonderful. They're more like me than the people I was taught to trust. And that allowed me to start my head changing. And things like The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And, you know, all of this wonderful, fabulous culture that came at us in the 90s, clueless, that allowed me to understand that I wasn't a horrible thing. I was actually a rather wonderful thing.
How old were you?
I was 23 when I came out, but I essentially became happy for the first time really in my life in college, like around 21. And it took 2 years of feeling fine and satisfied and no longer scared that somebody was going to make me work in a ditch for the rest of my life before I could sort of raise that topic and tell my parents.
What was it like for your parents and for the world back home?
Well, I came out of the closet when I was in law school in Minnesota over the phone to my parents. And it was very distanced, but I chose that because I knew that it wasn't going to go well. They were mad at me. Like, they were very deeply mad at me. They sort of like shut down to me for like a couple of years. They were going through some hard stuff themselves, but it was also, For a lot of gay kids, I think you're so aware of the problem that you're potentially going to be, and people are so likely to tell you what a problem you are, that you're just trying to not be a problem as much as possible. And it was really the first time in my life that I said in sort of a deep way, I need something out of you right now. And neither of my parents were really there for me. And my mom had always been great. My mom was the conduit where like all of this culture and wonderfulness, and my mom is Jewish, my dad is not. But my mom was also a connection to the idea of we live in a larger world than just Sutter, California. And she wasn't really able to be there for me at that point in time. And it was hard, it was hard, but it did force me to reach out in new directions for support. And I learned a lot about the world and myself.
Do you see your parents' reaction differently now than you did then?
It's nice to have a story where they figured it out and things got great. My dad died about a year ago, and there never came a point in time when he would directly address me being gay. He didn't need to hear about it, and if I tried to talk about it at all, and particularly when I would go home, one of the things I deeply needed to do was to build some sort of bridge between the person I was between 0 and 17 and the person I am now. And my parents were deeply uncooperative with that. I mean, one of the things about this question of like, can you have any relationship to the place that you're from? Jesse, it's so beautiful. There's this tiny little like range of volcanoes there, and like right in the middle of the Central Valley. And it is so beautiful, and I love it so much. But anytime I tried to talk about the person I was when I lived there or what it was like being there, they would get so mad. And that's hard because part of being a whole human being is not pretending that my life is West Hollywood and graduate degrees, but understanding that a lot of it is finishing concrete and smelling the guts of a pheasant. My mom's...
Why were they getting mad? What were they getting mad about?
They don't want to hear a story about how they were someone's jailer for 17 years, especially not when they were working very, very hard to keep my teeth taken care of and buy me G.I. Joes and, pay for me to go to Future Business Leaders of America conventions. Like, they thought they were doing their best job. And then I come back with this narrative of I was in pain the whole time. And these are people who, they had my sister when they were 18 and 19. They had me when they were 24. They worked their entire lives just to, like, give us a better life. And they did. And now I have to lay some narrative of oppression on top of that. Who do I think I am? My mom is better because women have to understand other people. For a long time, it was really hard for her to talk about that stuff. So my parents also didn't have any interest in paying attention to any creative work that I did because they were scared that I would speak ill of them or talk about being gay openly. And I do one of those things a lot in my act. So they never really paid attention to what I did. And then one day I was coming home from recording Pop Rocket here. And my dad said, "What did you do today?" And I told him I recorded my podcast. And he said, "No, what's that again?" And this was like the 17th time I had explained to the podcast to him. And I just sort of said, "If you cared, you would know by now." And like 3 weeks before he died, he listened to a Pop Rocket. And it was a Pop Rocket we had done about pop culture of the 60s. So he was able to like relate to it and understand it. And my father he did not make gestures to understand me better. And that he tried, and kind of was able to enjoy something. So before I lost him was a really wonderful thing. And it would not have happened without you. So I very much appreciate that.
Listening to Bullseye, my guest this week is comedian Guy Branum. You might know him as the host of our sister show, Pop Rocket. He now has his own TV show on Tru TV. It's called Talk Show, the Game Show. It's a talk show where people get points for being charming. I want to ask you a question that has to do with a theory that I've just formulated. So tell me if I'm off the deep end. But I know that through college and law school, you participated on these brain competition teams of, I think, a couple different kinds, right? Like college quiz bowl.
Quiz Bowl, yeah,
You were on the quiz bowl team.
at Berkeley and at the University of Minnesota.
And I feel like quiz bowl is a thing where not only do you get rewarded for being smart, but there's rules and standards that make it so that the playing field is even.
Yeah, I mean, the extent to which social rules make me happy because I understand, like, explicit social rules make clear what should be going on. When I was in high school, I was obsessed with parliamentary procedure, which is another kind of just sort of like providing clear structures for behavior. And if you're working within that, you're fine. And yeah, like as somebody who felt uncertain for most of my life, the clear validation of you ring a bell and you say Antigone and they say 10 points, just glorious. So satisfying.
Pro tip, the answer is always Antigone. Take it from a quiz bowl champion and a many-time academic decathlon medalist. Jesse and Guy say Antigone. That actually is pretty much the premise of Talk Show the Game Show. It is, what if being charming had rules?
Yes, exactly. So one day I was on my way to a Quiz Bowl tournament in Michigan, I believe, and I was in the back of a 15-passenger van on like a 12-hour drive, and my friend Anne-Marie and I were talking about television because that's what we talked about. And I just came down with a hard stance of there's a right and wrong way to be on a talk show. And from then on, we started discussing this idea of Talk Show the Game Show. And then 10 years later, I had left Chelsea lately and was in like a career funk and didn't know what was next. And one night I just stayed up late and I was like, well, how would Talk Show the Game Show work? And then I stayed up into the middle of the night writing up these rules. And then I asked Jamie Flam at the Improv if I could come and do it. And he said yes. And it was just so weird to, over 10 years later, this like whim I turned into reality, like dingy, like experimental space next to the Real Comedy Club kind of reality. But it was still real enough for me. And it was the night after the first Talk Show the Game Show is one of the happiest experiences I've ever had in my life. I could not go to sleep. I was just so delighted that it had worked.
Anyone who's ever heard you talk, Guy, and certainly anyone who's ever listened to you guest hosting this show or hosting Pop Rocket knows that charming is your favorite word in the English language. It's rare for you to complete a paragraph without using the word charming. It's your highest compliment. And I wonder why you came to value that word and idea so much.
It's nice when people are nice, you know? Like, it's nice when people are nice and people are giving the fullness of themselves to that. Like, so frequently when people come to Talk Show the Game Show, they think that they're supposed to be pretending to be doing something, that they're supposed to be doing some sort of parody of a person on a talk show. And the thing is talk shows at their best are people having a real conversation with the utmost of themselves. And I love Babette's Feast. It is a Danish movie from the late 80s about essentially about a woman who cooks a meal for some people. There's not much more to it. But one of the things she says is that an artist's dream is to give let me give my utmost. And I love to give my utmost, and I love to have my friends give their utmost and get to enjoy that. It's a beautiful thing. And when you're raised as a man in our society, giving your utmost is supposed to be this zero-sum game. It's supposed to be that there's a winner and a loser. And charm is the game where everybody wins.
You know, I feel like the record should reflect that with all of the weighty emotional topics that we've discussed on this program, which there have been many, the moment that you were forced to wipe a tear away was when we started talking about charm.
I cry at good things. Like, I cry a lot, but I cry at things that make me happy. Because Here's another of my grand theories. Why do they call us gay? Why is the euphemism for homosexual people that we are happy, especially when we know that gay people are so much more likely to experience depression and experience suicide or suicide attempts? And the thing is like, at the end of the day, once you realize I'm probably never going to have children, I'm probably who are a biological union of me and the person I love. Once you realize there's not really a religion that wants me, you have to have some reason to keep going. And a lot of people don't keep going, but the people who do figure out why. And I think that's why we as a people end up doing things that are fun and beautiful and charming, is because we have to, in an immediate sense, know why we're living this life and why there's a reason to keep going. So hard things happen, and I will get through them, but it is the wonderful things. It is Beyonce in the Dreamgirls medley at the Academy Awards the year that Dreamgirls was nominated that makes me cry every time, because that's worth living for.
It's Bullseye. I'm talking with comedian Guy Branum. He's got a new TV show. It's called Talk Show, the Game Show. It's airing right now on Tru TV. One of the reasons that I was so thrilled when you agreed to host the sister show of this show, Guy, was because you really care about people in the world. And I loved the pieces that you made for Totally Biased, the late night talk show that ran for a year or two on FX and FXX a few years ago. You were a writer on the show, and some of the writers came in front of the camera and delivered kind of signature bits. Yours was called No More Mr. Nice Gay. And I want to play one. And you are basically reacting to this guy called Chris Culliver, who played for the 49ers, I think, at the time, who had said some really lousy homophobic stuff, and said it publicly too. So this is my guest, Guy Branum, on Totally Biased just a few years ago.
I am here to call you out, Chris Culliver, not for being a homophobe, but for being bad at football. You said you can't be with none of that sweet stuff. You want to know what else would have been sweet, Chris? That Super Bowl ring you're never going to have. And hey, Chris Culliver, maybe you should worry less about who gets behind me on Saturday night and worry a little more about Jacoby Jones getting behind you on Sunday night than passing a pass, then scoring a touchdown. Because people only care what you think because you're good at football. And last Sunday, you weren't that good at football. Ha ha, you lost.
How did your job on that show end up being, and it's one that you're really good at, calling out stuff?
Well, one of the great things about Kamau is he was very aware of the fact that, like, as a black man who has had to watch white people talk about race on television for his entire life.
W. Kamau Bell, the host of the show.
Yeah. He understands that sometimes it's really annoying to have other people talking about your experience without having any experience in that world of their own. And so he was always really good about wanting people from the show to talk about their perspectives on things. And the thing is like, when you're a gay person, you've just lived a whole life with lots of people expressing opinions about you. And there is a presumption that you will simply be quiet and take it. And one of the things for me was the minute I came out of the closet, I was so full of Berkeley that I was just like, oh no, I will not take it. I will always say what I can. And another thing is years of starting out in stand-up, where people on stage were saying horrible things about gay people, and if I wasn't on the show or I wasn't after them on the show, I didn't get to say anything in response, just filled me with this deep need to be able to get my chance to say, hey, nobody, step back. And I remember hearing about that stuff from the two 49ers players and getting so mad and so hurt, particularly because they were from San Francisco, the place where I started comedy. and what should be the safest place for gay people in America.
And that was probably that's the football team of the place you grew up.
No, Jesse, we weren't rich enough to like the 49ers.
Was it Raiders country?
Oh, okay. So Raiders was deemed like a little bit edgy and trashy. So we were in this weird in-between territory where like my dad thought of us as like better than Raiders fans, but also not fancy enough to be 49ers fans.
Not white wine types like those 49ers
Exactly. So he always liked the Washington Redskins for no reason. But I remember watching the game and seeing the dude get behind him and catch the interception and just being so pleased that I was like, oh, that magical moment when it just crystallizes in your head exactly what you will say to someone. Because, finger up sass is it's very satisfying in a world where people have constantly been telling you who you are or how you should feel. There's something nice about, even if it doesn't change the world, just getting to let out how you feel.
What are the things in a talk show appearance that you value?
Here's what I want.
Let the record show that Guy struck a delivering the truth pose before saying this.
All right. I want an entrance. I want you to come in and let everybody know you're ready to be on. From one talk show appearance, I want one juicy, beautiful anecdote from your most recent project so that we get a feel of what you're doing, but it humanizes you. And I also just want sort of like a little banter on some sort of area of material, some sort of thing you're interested in so that we get to know what's going on in your life right now. Do you think that juicing has just gone crazy and they're too expensive? I want to hear a little bit of that. And also, I want you to show up looking like you're on a talk show. I want cocktail dresses. I want, a little bit of pop that says you're dressed like you, but you're dressed like the best version of you. And yes, I want you to be drinking or at least make a joke about how the stuff that's in your mug is alcohol, even if it isn't. I want at least pretending.
It's Bullseye. I'm talking with Guy Branum. Guy hosts Talk Show the Game Show on Tru TV. Guy, we don't have the benefit of a pre-interview on Bullseye, but I do want to ask you, you've been working on Talk Show the Game Show on the Tru TV network lately.
Yes.
Do you guys get up to a lot of hijinks on set, or?
And that's the terrible thing, is that I always worry that I don't have enough good anecdotes. I always worry that after I've put all of this stuff together, that I am myself a terrible talk show guest. Our first show, a little rough, didn't go great. Everybody was learning what they were doing. Second show, we had kind of one of the most produced segments we were ever going to do on the show. It was a bonus game for electronic music artist Moby. Are you familiar with Moby?
Sure. The charmer lives in a castle here in Los Angeles.
So my executive producer was essentially like, Guy, I don't know about this. Maybe we should just do some music trivia thing with him. We're putting an entire segment on Moby's comedy skills. Do you really think we should? And I was like, we put so much effort into it. We hung seitan and tempeh in bushes. Oh, he was hunting tofu. That was the game, is he was hunting tofu. And I was so uncertain about how the entire show was going to go because every time I had done it live, it was a great experience and it always felt fun. But after that first show, I was nervous. And the moment I handed that Nerf gun to Moby, and then a 51-year-old man bounced around like a child, shooting tofu skins out of the sky, it was magnificent. And from that moment on, I knew that things would be good.
I feel like one of the sort of rhetorical modes of funny gay men in America is bitchiness. It's by no means the only one, but it's one that's reasonably prevalent. And I wonder how you feel about that as a way of being funny and a way of being in the world.
Let us begin by saying I am proud of it. Bitch is a slur that we have for women who have opinions that they are not supposed to have. As somebody who is categorized as unmasculine, I am proud to have opinions, and I am proud to have opinions that are at odds with many of the set opinions of the world. There comes a point where you do have to wonder, how much am I letting my scar tissue define me? How much am I just being a creature of my anger? And it's really interesting when I see, like when I was first on television on a regular basis on Chelsea Lately, I started to have this experience of like gay guys complaining about me and complaining about how I was too fat and I wasn't a real gay guy for that reason, or I was too effeminate and so I was too gay for that reason. And they were telling what their problem was with me in their sassiest possible way. And I had to kind of respect it and love it because I knew that that's what I would have been doing if I was watching some gay guy on TV and wasn't the gay guy. I would be trying to express control over my world in some way and let out some degree of rage. And I think that a hard thing for the gay community, the gay male community particularly, is that we do so come from a space of criticism that we have a hard time making culture of our own and respecting culture of our own. God knows we can appropriate other people's culture and turn it into something magical. And appropriation is an important part of gay culture. We are not allowed to have our own culture until we are adults, which means as children, we are forced to learn through analogy and appropriation. I will never apologize for that. But I do think part of being a grown-up is like owning your damage and trying to move beyond it and learning not to just be immediately angry or critical. I love doing crowd work and I love sassing and being mean to someone in the audience. But one of the important things I learned as a stand-up is like, if you can take a heckler and turn them into a good audience member without making them feel bad, without alienating them, making them feel a little bit bad for shouting too much, but also making them feel warm and loved, like, isn't that better? Doesn't that make the whole audience feel better? Or one time I was at a show and I asked for somebody's name and a low voice gave me a woman's name. And so I immediately assumed that somebody was making a joke or was like trying to subvert me from the audience. And there was that gut comic reaction of tear them apart. And then there was that higher brain function of, guy, you saw a trans woman here earlier. It's probably just her. And it was a very funny comic named Olivia Hayter. And there's just something nice about being grown up enough to step back and realize there are answers other than rage. Like, there are answers other than bitchiness. There are answers other than tearing things down. Like, take a moment, breathe, and think if there is an honest or good reason for this.
How comfortable do you feel now in your life being a person that recognizes their scar tissue and moves on, or what you just said?
I get kind of scared of being happy or like fine. I get scared that I will lose my edge and I will no longer be a magical, dazzling creature. And it's hard as time goes on to accept your specificity. Like when you're 15, you're like, I could be anything. But as time goes on, you realize like, I've made choices, you know, and there are really good parts that go along with it and there are bad parts that go along with it. I've never really been in a stable romantic relationship. And I could just get mad at myself for that. Or I could understand that I lived in a world where that wasn't a possibility until I was an adult. And that has affected me. We can't pretend like it hasn't affected me. And there are magical things about it. And there are lots of other kinds of happiness that I have gotten to experience. I want to keep learning. I want to keep growing. I want to love as many people around me as I can. But also, like, your life happened. You know, your life happened and all of those specificities go along with it. And you have to play the hand that you were dealt.
Guy Branum, thank you so much for coming on Bullseye. It was great to get to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. It was always a pleasure.
Guy Branum. His show, Talk Show, The Game Show, airs Wednesday nights at 10, 9 Central on Tru TV. You can also catch Guy and his insights into popular culture on our sister show, Pop Rocket, which, oh my gosh, I almost made it through the whole show without asking, Guy, what's popping on Pop Rocket this week?
Hey, Jesse. This week on Pop Rocket, we are talking about the French cannibal horror film Raw. It will be a good time, and Karen is bringing snacks.
Guy Branum, ladies and gentlemen.